I hope we're getting this. You know, this is the part now where we kind of go into the afterburn and we start talking about the things that came up in the teaching and we have questions and comments. But I'd almost teach this every week until we get it. Because, you know what? Figuring out how to keep Shabbat is not as important as this, because you can get Shabbat down without too much problem. This is the harder part. You'll get Shabbat down. You'll get the feast down. You'll eat right. Those things are not that tough. You'll get them. The mechanical stuff is not hard. So I'm not saying I'm not minimizing your need to observe them. But those are the easy changes of life. Changing your diet, changing what days you keep. But how do we change our character? How do we change the way we treat each other and ourselves? Because the worst person you treat the worst is you, probably. I mean, the way we beat on ourselves and are frustrated. I get people calling me all the time saying, he's never going to want me. And they're not talking about their husband or their spouse. They're talking about the father. Why would he want me? I break his commands every day. I'm such a disappointment. Yes, you are, but that's okay. We always disappoint him every day, but he wants us to take that disappointment and use it as fuel to go forward and not to wallow in and get depressed. Because that's what would disappoint him the most. That would disappoint him more than anything else. You're quitting and being depressed instead of being motivated and moving forward. That's the greatest disappointment, I think, that would be to him. So if you have a comment or question here in the Afterburn, you are welcome to go ahead and raise your hand, and Zuriel will bring around the microphone. If you're on live stream, Craig will write it down. And we're going to ask that you keep your comments or questions targeted on what I taught today, or it could be in the first two parts, anything in the unity and division teaching, okay? Especially if it's from today, as it encompasses today. If you have questions about other things that I did not cover today, then please feel free to contact us another time, but not right now about it. Because some of you, I may have touched on something that you want to ask about, feast, Shabbat, kashrut, whatever. That's okay. Not for today. Today is about this teaching.
This week was really interesting. I went with a friend somewhere, and we went into one of the little thrift stores, and she had seen this little like bird cage type thing, and it was it had like $15 on it. Well, she walked away from it. She said it was cute, but she didn't want to pay that much, walked away. And a little while later, I decided, well, I kind of like it too. So I went to the lady and I said, I know there's $15, but is that your price? And the lady said, oh, no, that's not our price. So I said, well, how much would you take for it? And she told me, and it was like $1.50 or whatever. But the point was, I went ahead and got it. So afterwards, my friend was real upset with me, like, how could you go behind my back and get that? And so I said to her, I said, look, you put it down. I figured you didn't want it enough, or you would have asked, if this is the right price, or are you sure this is what you want for it? And so, of course, I got called the little Jewish girl. But to make a long story short, afterwards I thought about it, and I said to her, I said, something, I love you, and you're my friend. And something, this thing is not that important to me. Our friendship is what is important. And so basically I gave it to her. And it was just the mindset of how I could see in the past, I might have said, well, this is fair game. But here was a change of my heart that I was putting my friend, realizing our friendship was more important than that little trinket. And I think that's, if we can put others higher than ourselves and realize what really is important, I think that will be a big change in the body.
Amen. Amen. Now I'm going to have a slightly opposite take on that, only because there are situations where I would absolutely agree with that, but in some ways you have to be careful that you didn't just enable the behavior. Okay? Because if your friendship really means more to you, you need to have her realize that behavior is not good for our friendship. So I would have wanted to make sure that in giving it to her, that she would have had to jump through a few hoops to restore the attitude and the way she treated me, okay? Because otherwise what we're doing is allowing the squeaky wheel to win. And so be careful with that, okay? Now, what you could have done is buy it and given it to her because you knew how much she wanted it and liked it and didn't like the price, and just given her a gift. But once she showed and expressed that she was now holding the item above the friendship. So that was telling you something about how she thought of you. Okay? So you were learning something. And then you could say, look, I'm greatly saddened that you are holding this item above our friendship. I said, I don't want that to be above our friendship, and I would gladly give this to you, but right now I'm not sure what to do because I really don't feel good about the way you treated me over this. I'm just saying we have to be careful. One of the things that we have to be very careful about, which is not helping the problem, which is enabling and entitlement. Be careful of our behaviors that enable the bad behavior or encourage people to feel entitled. Okay? And that's also hurting the body. Okay? So I'm not saying your choice was wrong. I'm just saying that I would be concerned that this doesn't now encourage continued behavior of that nature, because after all, it got her what she wanted. Okay? The shirt, the blouse, whatever it was. This is something parents have a lot of problems with their children with, because they give in a lot because it's expedient. Okay? Or they convince themselves, I care more about my child than whatever. But you know what? It's only teaching them to continue that behavior style. It's not really helping necessarily. So I would have still wanted to maybe give her the shirt, but I would have wanted to have a much longer conversation first.
Okay, my question is, how do you talk to another teacher, or how do you relate to them so that they can come into the knowledge of the truth? Or on the other hand, if they come to you, what is the appropriate way for them to come to you if they feel that something you are teaching is wrong? How is there any kind of a resolution on that, or what?
Yep,
yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. All right, so this is how I want to address this. First of all, we don't understand teaching relationship as a relationship's supposed to be. So there are teachers out there. Just because they are teachers doesn't mean they're your teacher. If they're not in relationship with you, what you are obligated to them is respect. You can disagree with them all you want, do it respectfully. You don't have to submit to them or listen to them at all because they're not your teacher, but do it respectfully. In other words, they deserve respect as a teacher. If they are your teacher, then you now have a different level of respect, and you should be wondering about what you're doing versus what they're doing, because if they're your teacher, you've already chosen them and submitted to them like a discipleship program to submit yourself to them as a teacher. Therefore, you've already decided that most likely they're right and you're wrong, which is why they're your teacher. Okay? So let's say a teacher, meaning a pastor or somebody that you know who's a teacher in another denomination or church or wherever they are, comes to you and wants to talk about what you're doing. Show them respect, respectfully maybe disagree with them, but do not think that it's your job to teach them, but nor is it their job to teach you. You're not their student. But they do have a certain level of respect that is to be afforded to them and given to them because they've earned that by being a teacher. Does that make sense? Hold on. Okay, that's what I'm. Okay, so he said, so what if the teacher comes to you and they expect you to listen to them? That's when you have to explain, I appreciate that, but you're not my teacher. Okay? Teacher-student relationship is like anything else. It's an agreed-upon relationship. Just because I'm a teacher doesn't mean you're my student. Okay? It doesn't. If, let's say I'm teaching. We'll just make it more secular. Let's say I'm a fifth grade math teacher in Appleton Elementary School, okay? And you're a student in fifth grade math in Westview. You don't have to listen to me at all. I'm not your teacher, even though you are in fifth grade and you're studying math. Okay, so here you are studying the Bible. I'm a pastor at the Baptist church. I come to you because you used to be a part of the Baptist church, and I used to be maybe your teacher, but I'm not anymore because you don't attend anymore, and I try to come to you expecting you to listen to me, that's when you have to say, I appreciate that, I do respect you as a teacher, but you're no longer my teacher. And you have to find a way to say that without being condescending or argumentative, to say, I have a teacher now, and it's so-and-so, and that's my teacher. You're not my teacher. So I understand that you expect me to follow and listen to you, but that would have been true if you were my teacher. But we no longer have that relationship. It would be like a husband and a wife being divorced, and the husband or wife still expecting the other one to treat them as if they're still married. Well, you don't have that relationship anymore. So if somebody is a teacher, even if they used to be your teacher, if my 5th grade or 8th grade or 10th grade teacher in whatever subject ever came up to me expecting me to act in a certain way, I would say, that's all well and good, but I'm not your student anymore. That was 35, 40 years ago, whatever it was. Okay, so the question, so you didn't have the mic, so I'll just repeat the question. So the question is, what if somebody came in here, they're like from another background, like say they're Baptist or whatever, because we happen to be sharing a building here that is owned by the Baptist church. Okay, so let's say that somebody came in here and they started confronting me. The first thing I would have to say to them is, I appreciate your questions, I'm happy to answer them, but understand I'm not your pastor, I'm not your teacher, you have one already over here, and so I don't want to fight or argue with you, but I'll be happy to answer your questions. So then if they're willing to have polite discourse, it's a polite discourse between two people, not between a teacher and a student. The fact that I'm the teacher here is not relevant if they're already under another teacher somewhere else. And so I would then have a polite discourse if they're willing to, but understanding, I would say to them, look, but I don't want to overstep any bounds. You have a teacher. By the way, I'll take this a step further. If I go guest speak, which I don't really do much anymore, but let's say I used to guest speak occasionally and go to a congregation that invited me in, I would say to that congregation, just to be respectful, if I teach anything that disagrees or conflicts with what your teacher is teaching, you listen to your teacher, not me. I'm not your teacher. I'm just here to share information. I'm a guest speaker. And as a speaker, I'm sharing information that still needs to be filtered through and addressed in the way that your teacher would like it addressed. Because you have a teacher. And I'll point at the teacher and say, that's your teacher, I'm here to speak. Now, generally, that would never be a problem because the teacher brought me in because they already agreed with what I was saying and wanted the people to hear it from me because they weren't listening to it when he was saying it. Because that's the familiarity breeds contempt sort of thing, you know. And so sometimes it takes somebody from the outside to come in and say exactly what the teacher's been saying all along, and all of a sudden people are like, oh, wow, that was great. And the real teacher who's been there all along goes, what do you mean? I've been saying this to you for 5 years. It just takes a different voice. But if someone were to come in here that is not part of this, that is, I'm not their teacher, even if they're not another denomination, maybe they're Messianic or Hebrew roots, but they're coming and visiting from a congregation they attended somewhere else, until we have agreed to a relationship, I'm going to only look to have polite discourse and share information that they can choose to do whatever they want with. I have no expectation without relationship that you will do anything I say. Even if I don't care if it's the pastor or senior pastor of the church right over here, if they walk in here, they're not my teacher and I'm not theirs. I'm only open to polite discourse. I'm not interested in arguing or debate or becoming an instructor to them unless they then choose to say, I want to come under your instruction. Unless one of us says that, neither one of us is the other's teacher. However, being pastor of a church or rabbi of a congregation does require a certain level of respect. And that's the important piece of this, okay? The problem is when we try to, and I appreciate you bringing these things out because the problem is that people don't understand these things and they try to impose an inappropriate relationship, okay? Some of you have been here a long time. And I know I have a relationship with you where I am your rabbi and you are the student and we're here in this relationship as a congregation. I have a certain expectation if we talk and I give you counsel that you actually heed the counsel because that's the nature of the relationship. Others of you are much newer. We have not developed a relationship yet. I do not have as much of an expectation that if I give counsel that you might actually take the counsel because we don't have that relationship. In other words, by relationship meaning not by the fact that it's a lot of time, but by where I know you well enough that you have already said to me, Rabbi, you are my teacher, you are my rabbi, what you say, I'm going to take seriously as guidance and counsel and submit to that. It's a relationship by agreement. Remember, discipleship as taught you go back to the ancient Near East, in Yeshua's day. Discipleship was student asking the teacher, Yeshua being the only unique one that actually went and grabbed students. Generally, it was the other way around. Student went up to the teacher and said, "Teacher, would you take me as a student?" Teacher then would have to look at the student and say, "Well, let me think. Let's talk. Are you going to be willing to do this? Can I trust you to do that? Are you going to submit? Are you going to be stubborn and just be all headstrong? Let's have a little relationship for a little while and figure this out." If the teacher accepts that student, then they have an agreed upon relationship. Just like a marriage. A marriage is a type of agreed upon relationship. I'm not saying a teacher-student is like a marriage, meaning it has to be like husband-wife. I'm saying it's a agreed upon relationship. When I hire you on the job, if I'm your boss and you're my employee, I am the employer, we have an agreed upon relationship. Okay? And so the expectations should be clear what you should be doing as employee and me as employer. You cannot act like employer and start treating me like employee. We don't have that relationship. Wives, don't treat your husbands like you're the husband. Husbands, don't treat your wife like you're the wife. You have agreed upon roles in the relationship. In an employee-employer, one's the employee, one's the employer. In the rabbi or pastor and congregant, there's a relationship. But what happens is when the roles start getting blurry and people start to want to run into a different role. Okay? When somebody decides, well, I'm going to talk to the teacher as if I'm the teacher and I'm going to teach the teacher. Well, have you agreed upon that role? If you don't agree, it's not going to go well. And that's in all relationships. If you are acting one way and the other person has not agreed to that relationship, it's not going to work. It has to be by agreement. Is this making any sense? Okay, thank you for the question.
I submit to you that we've been trained that way in our religions that we've all come out of to come here. Excuse me. And we've been trained to evangelize with energy and forcefulness. And so if I was to evangelize to somebody, I'll either talk you into it or I'll kill you. One of the two ways. I want to get you to heaven. That's how you're trained. We've been trained that way. And so this whole idea that you're presenting to us is so wonderful because we were taught to go out and save the world. And one of the things I'll just bring up that would bring my veins to the top of my neck is for someone to argue once saved, always saved doesn't work, or it's not true. And as a born-again person, I would go absolutely berserk because you're taught that. And so it is so wonderful to come into this and realize that, like you've taught us, the Father does the calling. And so all these wonderful abilities that you've mentioned, the Spirit, you gotta flush it away. You gotta get rid of it and just have the peace and the joy that you have talked about. And I was thinking about that. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you. See, let's understand a couple of things from what Richard was bringing out. First of all, we don't understand what evangelism is. Christian evangelism is wrong. The whole process is wrong. In other words, to go and try to impose yourself on others. That's not what evangelism is scripturally. Evangelist is the promoter who goes out there and lets somebody know something's available. That's where you point them towards a teacher. Hey, you know what? I've got this teacher. I think he's great. I think he can help you. That's evangelism. Okay? When I post a teaching on Facebook, the few of you that always reshare it right away, you're evangelists. You don't even know it. You're making something available. You're excited about something and you're letting people know something's available. That's different than the evangelism from Christianity is concerned whether or not you actually respond to it. In other words, I can't just make it available to you. I have to sit there and wait and badger you till you actually take it and use it. Okay? So in other words, it's like if I were to offer you a teaching and I'm going to sit on you until I actually see that you actually watch the teaching. Instead of saying, hey, listen, by the way, there's a teaching you may want to check out. Well, once I've done that, I've done my job. If you never check it out, it's not my problem. That's not my concern. See, that's the problem with evangelism from a Christian point of view. Okay? Because they're results driven and they're looking at the wrong result. You know, evangelists are simply letting people know there's something you may not be aware of that's available. Hey, you may want to check it out. That's evangelism. You're excited about something. By the way, all of you are evangelists. About anything you're excited about that you tell your friends about. It could be a book, a movie, a recipe, a new restaurant, a new gadget, something. It could be anything. You're evangelists already. You do that in your life about whatever it is you like and are excited about. What do? You tell everybody about it. By the way, if you make them go get one or watch it or buy it, now you're doing it in a Christian way. See, now you've overstepped the bounds of what evangelism is. But let's say that you found a new store that has some great new thing and you want to just tell everybody, hey, you can go to the store, it's got great price. Hey, you're telling people about it. Now, if you start calling everybody to find out if they went yet, did you go yet? Did you go yet? Did you go yet? Did you go yet? When are you going? How come you haven't gone yet? That's the same thing. Dealing with spiritual stuff when it comes to evangelizing. Okay? If you're excited about something, you share it. Once you've shared it, it's on them. You know? And we're not overstepping, and this is what Richard was also talking about, we're not overstepping the Father's bounds. You know, we can't save anybody. We can't save the world. The only shot you have is on you, walking out your own salvation in fear and trembling. Everything else falls on Him. The Father and the Son have that burden of responsibility, not you. Now, you have a responsibility to let your light shine and do what you're supposed to do. So in case they decide to utilize you by leading somebody into your path for some help, or maybe someone just watching what you're doing, you may not realize how many people are watching what you're doing and how much that makes a difference in how they believe and agree on the Father and the Son based on knowing that you have a relationship with them and what you're doing. They're watching you. So that's important that you see that as well. Now, the other thing that Richard mentioned I want to bring out is, like, he talked about how, he can get a little, back the veins going on about the are you saved or once saved, always saved, that kind of thing. You know what? Look, we talked about this last week, I think, in the teaching, or I'm pretty sure it was last week. Look, we had a problem here in this congregation where when I did teach the teaching on are you saved, there was more than one, but one person in particular, but other people, that because they disagreed so much, it wasn't enough to just disagree, it wasn't enough to just leave, but felt the need to convince everybody else. That's where we get into trouble. When you allow that mindset to come into you, where not only is it bother you, but now you're so concerned for everybody else that you got to disturb everybody else's peace, you can't allow them to make up their own minds and come to their own decisions. That causes division. And you know what it did? It split the congregation in half. Well, 60-40, something like that. It was a big split. But what was the cause of the split? The teaching I did? No. The way it was reacted to. That's what caused the split. Could have been reacted to a whole different way. We could have had a much more open discussion. We could have made it into a big congregational discussion. We could have made a big, properly controlled debate out of it. No. But this is just an example of the many ways that the body ends up splitting. This is just because exactly the way this happened is the way it always happens. Okay? This is just like a textbook perfect example. I don't like it. I think it's wrong. So I'm going to now have to cause everybody to agree with me that it's wrong and get everybody to be against the person that I think is wrong. So now we've caused a rift and a split. We didn't go to Matthew 18, which is going to come up in the next part of the part after that, which talks about the right way to handle things when there's an issue. And there's a process, which, by the way, has never, in my witnessing, been followed. I've never seen anybody really do it. They just don't. It's there in Scripture. It tells you how to go about the process. And I can promise you, in all the splits that have happened here, that's never been done. Nobody's ever done Matthew 18 to resolve a split, resolve an issue before it causes a split. Have you ever seen it done? It never happens. That's the sad part. We have a protocol here that really is designed to handle all those things so it doesn't cause a split, and nobody uses it. Isn't that sad? What was that? Well, because they don't believe it's the process. Well, you know what? Because the process that's in Matthew 18 puts them at risk because then the decision may not go their way. You see? So now there's a risk that they won't agree with you. And so why take that risk? Because what if you go and bring witnesses and the person doesn't still hear, and then you go to the elders, and what if the elders tell you, by the way, we agree with him? What? See, you can't take that risk. What do you mean you agree with him? I'm right. Well, actually, no, we don't think you're right. Actually, we don't even know why you brought this to us. Why is this a big deal? Because your want, need, disconnect got all messed up. You took something personally. You were mostly invested. All the things we talked about. And so therefore, you got all upset about something that, by the way, most people would never have been bothered by, but it bothered you. And then you get more frustrated when you talk to people like, what's wrong with all these people? Why can't they see how terrible this is? Because it's not so terrible. Maybe it's you, not them, that's the problem. Just a thought.
I think you probably just mentioned it in your little speech there, little sermon. But I just wanted to say, like, I understand your teachings and I accept them and I love them. And there are people that I'd like to send them to, but I would send them out and I would violate their space because they don't believe as me, as I do. So I think as all of us as a group, we would like to hand out things and send out things, but I think we have to be mindful unless that person says to you, gee, I'd like to learn more about that or understand that we shouldn't overstep the bounds and be forceful on what we do. And I think it comes from the Jewish mindset. You never hear, growing up as a kid, I never heard the proselytization of the Jewish faith to me. You won't. That's just not the way they are. And if we're to be Israelites, we shouldn't be doing that.
Amen. Look, it'd be like, could you imagine going to the library, okay, and as you walked in, the person by the door, there was the librarian handed you a book and told you this is the book you're supposed to read? Well, what if I don't want to read that book? No, here's your book. I want you to read this book. But I didn't want this book. This is a problem. Okay, this is a problem. Now, there is a little bit of evangelism in Judaism, but it's within Judaism, and the Chabad is very big with that, but it's Jews reaching out to Jews in terms of within their own thing. Okay? And so the Chabad Jews wanted, but they do it in a more or less gentle way. They say, look, have you ever considered what we're doing over here? Do you want to come and check it out? And they're mostly looking for the secular Jew. They're not going and bothering the very active conservative or reformed Jew, but the Jew who's really not doing anything and say, have you really considered maybe looking at this? So it's not that the Jews don't evangelize, but it's not like Christian evangelism. Okay? It's just not. All right? I was approached when I was waiting for my child to come out of school in New York. It was kindergarten. I was waiting for Stephen and Brianna to come out of class at the end of the school day, and one of the Chabad people saw me. For whatever reason, could tell I was Jewish. The seat or something must have given me away. But the thing is, they came over to me and they didn't know me to be going to Chabad, and they just wanted to hand me a little leaflet that said, hey, you may want to come check us out sometime. That's as pushy as it was. You know, here's a little piece of information about us if you ever want to come. We have a free thing we're doing that you can come check us out. So that's a different type of thing. If we're running like our picnic in mikveh, okay, so maybe invite somebody to come and talk to us and meet some of the people. We're running a Hanukkah celebration or a Purim celebration or something. You might want to say, hey, listen, you always have wondered what I do. Maybe you want to come and check something out. But don't make them come. I'll give you a really funny example. My mother, when she knew I was starting to go to, this is when I first started attending Worldwide Church of God, okay, and it was my first time attending anything after being bar mitzvahed. I stopped attending anything. And so she was like, well, I want to come. I want to see what you're doing. Now, Worldwide had a policy of that you didn't just come unless they interviewed you first, because they didn't want anybody coming and causing a big scene, because after all, someone could walk in and really cause a scene because things are very different. I'm not afraid of that. We let anybody walk in the door that wants to come in. But they had this thing that they were very afraid of, whatever. So when I told my mother, I said, well, look, let me go ahead and talk to the elders and get that worked out. And she was like, oh, no, I need to come. Well, once they said she should come, I said, okay, Mom, you can come. She goes, that's all right, never mind. She didn't really want to come, okay? So we make things available to people. They really don't want to come, but don't push. I never pushed my mother to come. As a matter of fact, you will never see her on Shabbat here if she's visiting town. She'll plan it around so she doesn't have to do this. You know one of the reasons why? Because you people will badger her. That happened many times when she used to come in the past. Everybody tried to convince her to come and become like we are. They wouldn't leave my parents alone. Not everybody, but there was always one or two or three that would try to convince them to see Yeshua the way I do. And so they won't do this. Okay? So they'll come, so they don't get to spend the weekend with us. They'll come during the week or whatever, and that's how they'll come. You'll never see them here. And that's sad. And that's because we still haven't gotten that evangelizing thing out of us that you pointed out, right? Where we feel like, oh, we got to... Listen, they know I've been doing this for like 20 plus, well, however many years I've been doing this. This is nothing new to them. They know everything they need to know about it. They've watched the live stream from time to time. They've heard the teachings, to whatever degree they've ever listened. They know it's available. If they ever have an interest, they know exactly who to call. We don't push anything on them, okay? We don't push anything on them. And that's the way we should be with all things.
How do you handle an individual that cannot be convinced that their want is not a need? And then from Nate Taylor, how do you balance being of like mind but also maintain who you are?
Okay, I would not have necessarily said that those are actually grouped together, but that's okay. All right, the first one with the want and the need. You have to very patiently with somebody simply say, I know you want that. I know you think you need this, but it's, you know, you can live without it. See, that's kind of what you point to. If you could still exist and live without whatever it is that you want, then it's a want. Needs are only things you need to exist. Food, shelter, air, water, you know. Okay? Sleep. If we don't sleep, we really get very bad if we don't. I mean, that's one of the ways they torture people. They keep them up, keep them up, keep them up. Okay, there's not too many things that you actually need, all right, that you actually need. So convincing somebody, I wouldn't try to convince anybody of anything. I would just keep patiently saying, I understand that you want that. I understand that you think that's a need. I'm not able to give that to you. I'm sorry, okay? You can't convince somebody of it. You just have to realize what you're dealing with, okay? All right? And so as gently, as politely as you can, extricate yourself out of the situation. I've had people walk in here, and over time, they'll start to say, well, you need to, or this needs to, and this. And I say, I appreciate that's your position, but that's not going to happen. I appreciate your position, but that's not what we're going to do. I appreciate your position, but we're not doing this. And I could say that over and over again. As much as they want to go the other way, I can go that way too. Okay? But. Okay, but. We're not, nevertheless, we're not doing that. Okay? I said, you can ask me 75 more times. I'm still going to say no. I mean, it's not a need. If it is, then go find some place to have your need met. It's not going to be met here. If it's something I've already said we're not doing, then we're not doing it. Okay? So hopefully that helped with the one. And then the other one was Nate had asked about, well, what about if you, how do you get to unity but not give up who you are? Okay? This is the big challenge. Okay, therein lies the huge challenge. It's one thing to, like, we're all here in one room. So in a sense, we're unified for a few minutes. We're sitting in the same building at the same place. You're all on live stream with us at the same time. But yet, every one of you has some aspect of this walk that is different than everybody else. There's some things that you do that only maybe half the room does, something you do that only half the room you do. I mean, there's lots of things that we all see slightly differently. If you allow everyone that space while doing what we can together, eventually, hopefully, we come to the fullness of unity of Yeshua as those things that we differ on become less and less. And part of that is as we come into a fellowship and relationship with instruction coming through teaching that we trust and we can relate to, and then we can allow that guidance to bring us into unity. Unity comes through leadership. But leadership can only work if it's submitted to voluntarily, through relationship. Okay? All of these problems are only going to be solved. Nate, I mean, this is for Nate, and for all of you like Nate, this is why Yeshua is coming with the rod of iron. And it won't be as small as this pen. Because unity is going to have to be forced to some degree. But that's okay when it's coming from the one with authority. If you are the father and you have children in your house, you can force unity. If there are those in your house that refuse, they can leave your house. Some of you have teenagers that they get to a point where you say, this is creating disunity in the house, go do that somewhere else. In this house, we do things this way, and that's where the unity is. When Yeshua comes, the world will be his house. And there will be unity in his house, or there will be consequences until unity comes. Does that make sense? So we can start to do that together here. I'll give you an example. In the Orthodox Jewish communities, and there are various ones, there's a tremendous amount of unity because they all respect the Rebbe, which is the head rabbi, and what he says goes. That's by choice. They have chosen to trust and believe and respect his authority, which he does not wield dictatorially. But the point is, they have unity because they have voluntarily decided to trust a person's leadership as coming from a correct relationship vertically. Okay? That could turn out very good. It could turn out into cultish craziness. But that's where it has to come from relationship and from using wisdom and discernment and not just following a personality, because you're not following a person. You're submitting to what you see the Father doing through that person and allowing that person to bring the group into unity. Does that make sense? Because isn't that what Yeshua was going to do? Isn't that what he was trying to do when he walked the earth? Isn't that what Moses was doing? Right? Moses was trying to bring the body into unity. But they had to. Now you see what happened when the group did not voluntarily submit to Moses. They had big problems. Am I claiming anybody alive today is a Moses? No, but we have those that are like in terms of the type and the shadow of that. Your congregational leader is that person if you've chosen that person because of relationship, not just because he's the only one in town. Because you may only have one choice in your town, so you may not want to have that relationship with that one person because maybe he really isn't the one you need to do that with. But when you find that one, then you need to get in there and have that relationship, and then we find that there will be unity. Look, this is the reason that we read it in the Bible for over all the years we're reading it, that it started out all the way at the beginning and working its way till now. We still have the same problems because this is the hardest thing we do. To come into agreement as a group of people, to be in unity. This is by far the most challenging thing that we are asked to do. It's not that challenging to ask your boss to take off at the holy days and Shabbat. It sounds like it is, but it's not. What's challenging is to get a group of people to be on the same page, to be of one mind and one opinion and one purpose. That is the hardest thing that we have to do. And we have to figure this out. Because I promise you, this word here that we read, the scripture, tells us that the Messiah is going to impose that anyway. So why not learn it now before he gets here? Then we'll be ready to understand how to do that. And so that's what this is all about. Amen?